So this is certainly not about, individuals in terms of their personal feelings. Generally, it's seen that ego comes in the picture when the negotiations begin. You may also get upset or agitated, excuse me, about trivial matters during the negotiation. You need to learn to avoid these tendencies. So stay calm, stay collected, stick to your facts and figures. During the negotiations, you need to be aware of what you are saying and how you're behaving. Being polite and professional is always recommended during the negotiations. However, you will have to be assertive at times when the other party takes you for granted, and also being assertive in terms of not being too brash or loud, if you like, and also not being too meek. So that's what that assertive bit means there. Finally, you need to concentrate on the outcomes or results. Yeah. So in here we are saying, don't be too quick to get angry or excited. Stay calm. If you do find a way of taking a break or finding somebody else to just take over for some of the sessions so that things move smoothly. The third one is be prepared to arrive at a compromise. It is important that you have sufficient space for negotiation. The more space, the better. Will be the maneuverability. Concessions are generally necessary during negotiations, and you need to be prepared to accept them when you enter into the negotiations. In lieu of the concessions, you have the right to expect reasonable compromise from the other party too. So this is the part where we talk about trade-offs. What are you able to give up for things to move forward, for us to smoothen the path without obviously affecting the final outcome or results. And the other party also need to be prepared to be flexible to some certain degree. Next, we look at sticking to what you say during the bargaining stage of the negotiation. There are places where you cannot and you should not budge. However, you'll have to be ready to defend them. This applies to specific details as well as overarching principles and probably values. When you arrive at a compromise, you'll have to make sure the other party and you are on the same page. So in this part here, you will be looking at things around, say, ethics and integrity. Do not move away from those and the values that drive you and or your business, because then you might make a decision or come to a decision which might be regrettable in the future. Okay. Listening carefully to the other party, very important here, because listening skills are very much needed during negotiations, because you need to ascertain the other party's position and help find common ground. To find that common ground, you will have to watch out for hand gestures, body language, and signs of vulnerability. In addition, you'll have to listen very carefully for possible pointers to common ground. So listening actively to be able to understand what the other party is saying, and not be too quick to respond and to just answer, but to answer with an understanding and appreciation of what has been said, and questioning to seek clarity on what you have heard. So an absolute important part when it comes to negotiating. All right. Yep. Next one is to confirm and ratify any decisions or agreements that you make. After you have done the negotiations, it is important to put the decisions or agreements on paper. Also, after you put the deal on paper, make sure that all details are captured and complete. And finally, get everyone to sign it. This prevents any misunderstanding in future and ensure that action points are completed by the end date. This would certainly initially start off with a draft agreement that you share with everyone. They go through it, and if and when they are happy, then they can sign on it, and it will be the basis of your action plan. Okay. Before we go to these steps, are we okay with these pointers that we have shown? I'll just check my chat box. Just very quickly. All right, great. Thank you, Nelias. All right. Okay, let's move on. Excuse me. To the steps you should follow for an effective negotiation. Step 1, identify and find what are the satisfactory outcomes for you. So what are you going to achieve at the end of it? That should be clear in your mind. This is how we want the results to look like. Step 2, find opportunities to create value during the negotiation process. And what sort of value might this be? It could be that you are looking at a future with this other party or partner. So you want to show them that you value that relationship, and therefore you can work together, not just at this point, but also in future. Step 3, identify your partner and the other party's partner. If all else fails, what is that one thing or minimum that you can walk away with? That is critical. Then 4, you can certainly improve your partner. Maybe not at that point, but in future, if it's at that point, yes, that's fine. But it should be that every party walks away from there feeling satisfied that this is an okay point. We are doing well in whatever we are trying to do. 5, during the meeting, identify the person with maximum authority. Yes. I know sometimes you will be made to negotiate or have discussions with somebody who is not the final decision maker, but such is life. You hopefully finally get to that person who can sign the dotted line. 6, carefully observe and study the other party. How do you do that? We mentioned the face-to-face interaction. We mentioned active listening and questioning to seek clarity on what is happening. And 7, there, prepare for flexibility in the process. Objectives, agreements will need to be flexible. And 8, make sure that you have set objectives, criteria to establish fairness. I think that fairness is really just the point where you don't get angry, for example, you don't shout, you're respectful to the other party when you're negotiating. I'm sure we have all had negotiations at one point or another. If you're working, I'm sure people have come to you, maybe they want a raise or you want a raise. Maybe you want to move to another department. Maybe your action plan needs something. A very common one, obviously, is the end of year performance appraisal. That is also a negotiation moment, isn't it? Because maybe your bonus or raise depends on how you present your achievements for the year. And that again is a negotiation. We mentioned the home front. Also, there's places where we negotiate for that. So let's move on and look at the types of third parties that might come in. And I use the word might, depending, because it depends on the need for a third party. And you might be that third party actually in a certain situation. Okay. Oh, just yes. So in many cases, it may happen that the two parties can't arrive at an agreement. And in such cases, it might be helpful to involve a third party. A third party can prove to be useful in negotiations, as we will see, because they can offer each party a chance to open up and vent their feelings and concerns in front of a non-threatening and objective person. It gives the involved parties a chance to disclose their feelings about the situation. So just the fact that there's another person who can listen objectively and you can vent and say things that you might not possibly say to the negotiating partner, this is a very helpful situation. The third party may help in providing a learning opportunity to both parties where they can benefit from the experience and expertise of the third party. They can help both parties to organize their thoughts and put across their views in a harmonious manner. They could also just help you to provide options that may be acceptable to both parties and help reconcile their differences. We've seen many times, just maybe an example, when we had our post-election problems, violence in 2007 and 8, we got quite a number of people to come in and, help in the negotiations. We had former president from Tanzania, Kikwete, we had Kofi Annan, and quite a number. Those really certainly helped us to calm down and start to see things in a different perspective. What types of various third parties that might be involved? We have 4 here. One is a mediator. We have an arbitrator. We have a conciliator, and we have a consultant. Let's have a look at each one of them. And maybe you have played one of these roles or several of the roles. Please let us know how that worked for you. The first one is a mediator, who is a natural party, neutral party, who has no stake in the outcome of the agreement. Is a negotiator who acts as a link between parties during a negotiation. So really just bringing people together, no particular stake. The second one is an arbitrator, a natural third party who has the legal power to bind both parties in an agreement determined by the arbitrator. Is someone chosen to judge and decide a dispute issue, such as an umpire or referee. Arbitration is a common process, especially in our judicial process. Sometimes the magistrate or judge will say, no, you guys go and sit with an arbitrator and agree on the outcome of this. I know KRA, Kenya Revenue Authority, also does a lot of arbitration before going into a legal process of going to the judiciary. So this would be the work of the arbitrator. Hold on, let me check something on the chart. Shows, I don't know, the problem is there's a lot of sound breakdown. Please, I understand technology has problems, but do help if possible. Okay, give me 1 minute. Let me see what I can do. Okay, hopefully we have a better connection, Rose. If we don't, please let me know. So yeah, we're talking about arbitration. Then we have, the next one is a conciliator. This is a trusted third party whose role is between the negotiating parties. He is someone who tries to bring peace between two conflicting parties to reconcile and bring people together, using information and facts so that people see a different perspective from what they might have. The fourth one is a consultant, a third party who teaches and advises the negotiating parties on skills and techniques in a domain of his experience. He's an expert who gives advice. So for people in HR, you might know of FKE, Federation of Kenyan Employers. They sometimes act as consultants. They have also quite a bit of training on various issues. And this is an example of a third party acting as a consultant. Good. Let's look at a few real life examples. And we'll read out different scenarios, and I would like you to tell us which one of those 4 third parties that we went through match each of these. We have Jack Gibson, we have Howard Smith, David Fox, and Keith Macmillan. Let's look at Jack. Jack Gibson has been called upon to help negotiate the scope of work in a software development project. Jack is present at a negotiation meeting between the client and a few people of software development team of the company that will develop the software. It is Jack's responsibility to make sure both the parties have the updated information to negotiate at the meeting. It is Jack who ensures that a steady flow of accurate information exists between the negotiating partners. So where would Jack fall in as a negotiator? Think through it and see where he falls in. I'll just see. I think I'm gonna go through all the 4 and we can agree on who is what. We have Howard. He's a project manager at a leading electronics equipment manufacturer. 2 of his subordinates, Kevin and Max, enter into an argument about personal habits and lifestyles. Howard has no personal gain in this or interest in the outcome of the agreement. However, he steps in between the 2 in the argument and tries to reconcile their differences by helping them negotiate their differences. Okay. And we have David. He's called to a negotiation meeting at Globus Inc. Globus is having its new manufacturing plant constructed at a new location. Globus has asked Helios Electricals to provide the required MCBs and all other necessary electrical equipment that will be required to run the plant safely and smoothly. David has been called to a technical discussion meeting to provide advice and guidance during the negotiating parties on skills and techniques of reaching an agreement about the technical specifications of the required electrical equipment. Okay. Finally, we have Keith. You see that Gelix is a leading manufacturer of cosmetics. Recently, there was a spike between the workers at one of its manufacturing units and the management with respect to daily wages and working hours. The workers feel that the wages are too low and the working hours are too long. The management has called a negotiation meeting with the leaders of the workers' union. Keith Macmillan has been called to the same negotiation meeting to help the 2 parties negotiate smoothly and also help reach a legal binding agreement, which Keith has the legal power to impose on both parties. So those are our 4 examples. Let's see what we have here. Where would you place each one of those? Let's look at the answers. Jack acts as a conciliator, bringing the two parties together to ensure steady flow of accurate information exists between negotiating parties. So he really is a trusted third party whose role is very neutral, if you like. Okay, oh, there you go. I've got a few people making suggestions on there. All right, thank you for that in the chat box. And we have Howard is acting as a mediator who has not taken the outcome of the agreement that is going to be eventually put into place. Great. Now David, who comes in with his advice and technical approach and teaches and advises the negotiating parties on skills and techniques in his area of expertise. All right, thank you, Alice. And Rose too. And finally, we have Keith. This we saw has a legal power to bind both parties in an agreement determined by himself. So he is the arbitrator. This process is arbitration, and both parties then need to agree with what he says. At this point of arbitration, if the parties don't agree, then they can move it forward to maybe a judicial process or court process. The right to appeal is always there. Okay, sounds good. Move on. Let's look at some negotiation strategies that you can use. We've got 6 of them, and maybe we'll take a break after that. Start with a no. You should start a negotiation with a firm no to things that are totally unacceptable to you. You should never compromise. At the same time, you should also invite the other party to say no. It is crucial that you let the other party know that you won't consider their no as a personal rejection. Now, while we're saying here you should start with a no, obviously don't go into a meeting and just no, 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 no. Apana, won't agree to anything. This no bit here is to things which are not acceptable. So again, think about ethics, integrity, values, or even things which you might not be able to afford. Yeah. So if you are negotiating maybe a raise and you can see your business is not able to afford it, then obviously that will be a no point. Okay. I see, I'll just go back a bit. I see a question here. Can a third party from Polycarp play more than one role, e.g. consultant and arbitrator? I would say yes. You might be able to combine some of those roles as a third party, all right? So if you are a mediator, you want these two parties to come together, yes, you could also offer them technical advice, which then makes you a consultant of sorts. Or as you have mentioned, if you're a consultant and you're also arbitrating, you could at some point also be able to say, this is a professional or technical approach, which you can then use. So you're absolutely right, Polycarp, about that. The process here, as we said, just say no to things which are not acceptable to you. Let's have a look at the next one. Be prepared, certainly. One of the most important strategies is to be completely prepared, not just prepared. So before you get into the negotiation meeting, you should make sure to get all the information of the other party as well as the issue at hand. You should keep a tab of your potential competition as well as keep a check of your own position. This preparation is really more, if you ask me, about you more than the other party. It is completely understanding and appreciating where you are, where you've come from, and where you want to go. Sorry, it's getting some background noise from a helicopter here or something. So again, hold on this moment. Yeah, sorry, too many helicopters. Maybe our politicians are traveling for end of year party. So work on your facts, information, data to ensure that you feel prepared and are prepared. Next one is the closure. It is very important that you enter into any negotiation without any preconceptions of the outcome of the negotiation. So you should forget the closure at that point and never think about the outcome before or during the meeting. The only thing that you're focusing on, focus your attention is on what you can control at that moment. So while yes, you have an idea of the outcome that you want, let it not overwhelm you, and that's the only thing that you're thinking about, because there's going to be give and take from both sides until you finish. You also want to expose the big issues and problems at the very beginning. Use the negotiations as a platform to bring out your problem and put it in front of the other party. Also, at the same time, you should try your best to bring out the problem of the other party, the big issues. Such clarifications of the issues at hand will help to clear the air and eliminate any surprises. Yesterday, when we were looking at some of these strategies of negotiation, I think we talked about avoidance as a strategy, because there might be, for example, very petty issues. So why waste your time? The thing about this is really to have the big blocks put on the table. So you're not starting with non-issues. You're really going deep to the root cause of the problem rather than the symptoms of it. The symptoms could be anything from anger, rejection, whatever it is, but what is the root cause? What is the big problem? That's the thing that you want to place on the table so that you start to deal with it. And not to say that you are not empathetic to you don't have empathy to the other party, because when you appreciate people's feelings, so for example, you appreciate their anger, then it means that you kind of are connecting with them. But what is causing that anger is what you have to deal with. Then get people to talk. One of the best strategies to gain other people's trust, as well as to extract information from them, is getting them to talk. This is because by making other people talk, you gain yourself an advantage of knowing more about them than they know about you. One of the best ways to extract information is by asking questions. For example, what is making them act that way or feel that way? Why, how, when, and where. So the 5 W's and the H is a good questioning technique. I think this part is really about more of opening up about each other. It's kind of the Johari window situation where you want people to come out, and there might be even things that they don't know about themselves, but once they get to talk, then these things come out. And part of this process is also connected to what we mentioned earlier on listening, active listening, as much as possible, and showing that you are listening. Okay. And we move on. And the last one bit here is to be the problem solver. Portray yourself to be a solution provider. This will help other people to see that you're proposing a deal to their advantage. So don't go in a combative situation. You also need to provide ideas and solutions to the negotiation. Okay, sounds good to me. If there's no question, I suggest let's take one more before we go for a break and look at the probe technique for negotiation. It's an acronym, PROBE. The P stands for preparation. The R, rapport building. The O, opening, and part of that bargaining process. Sorry, the B is for bargaining, and the E, ending with commitment. So preparation, we talked about this earlier in being completely prepared. If you want to be a brilliant negotiator, you'll have to make sure that you have lots of information. In any negotiation process, it is the person with the greatest information who sets the rules or has an advantage anyway. You need to prepare in such a way that people get impressed by the amount of information you have pertaining to the situation. Now, this preparation and the information, you're not coming in to brag and bring loads and loads of paper and pickups and say, hey, look, I have all this information against you or that I want to use. It really is to help both parties come to an agreement. It is information that is grounded, and we have, as you said earlier, it could be information about you and also information about the other business, for example. So for example, if you're doing a mergers and acquisition negotiation, you could come with information that says, hey, your market share is only 12%. Your future outlook growth is maybe what, 2.5%, while ours is in a better position. So using that information to provide a basis for moving forward. Let's look at the R, your rapport building. You need to clearly understand how to make people comfortable. You need to have a good set of icebreakers, yes, and set up the room for the meeting. This is because the person who controls the agenda also controls the meeting. You need to have a clear understanding of the objectives that you are going to achieve in the meeting. So relationship building, this is exactly what it's about. Opening bargaining means to set the scene for the bargaining. It is important to manage each other's expectations, so it is crucial that you approach the negotiation meeting with an open and flexible mindset. That's the O. The B is then the bargaining bit, where you will see your negotiation becomes much easier by building relationships. Sticking to the agreed agenda will avoid destructive discussions, but also share information and ask questions, making sure that you remain positive and that you are listening. Then we have the E, ending with commitment. It's important that you gain the other party's understanding of the agreed terms and commitment at the end of the meeting. So a good negotiator really will document all that is agreed in writing, or a contract, or an email, or even a letter. So that is your probe process. Let me just see, take a pause there. All right, thank you, Rose. Let's see what we have here. Tip: people often feel that they are powerful and try to use their power during the negotiation. However, it is crucial that you understand that exercising power can sometimes backfire, and you should also balance the use of power against the following potential risks. One, while you may think that you are powerful, the powerful one in a negotiation, the other party may have a view that they are also that they are the more powerful party. It's not helpful. Power games. When you use your power, you tend to be more aggressive and coercive in your approach, which may lead to resentment in the other party. And three, exercising power may sometimes win you the negotiation. However, you lose out on the relationship building and on your social image and reputation. I think this is a good point. You need to come out. You need to come to the table with how do you say, a decent way of looking at things. If you come umejipiga kifua, you are the boss here, or I'm the one in charge of this, maybe not, depending on what the other party is looking at. I'm sure unless you're a mediator, if you're negotiating, you will probably be negotiating with somebody who's in the same on the same power, if you like, as you. So don't go in too strong and misuse that, because the relationship then will break down, as you have seen. Okay. Strategies for setting goals for negotiation. It is very important to be clear about the goals. We've talked about this. It's because if you don't have sufficient information in the beginning, you're not sure about your goals, then you are going in the wrong direction. It is crucial to evaluate your goals in relation to the other side's goals and determine common ground and differences between them. So a few questions before you go in. What are my goals? Where am I going? What do I want out of this negotiation meeting? We've talked about offering concessions. It is important that before offering the concession, you should find the right point of time in the meeting and the point of discussion at which you can offer the concession. So don't go in and just, offer the concession. Why are you offering the concession at the beginning? So it needs to be at a certain point when you realize then that it will do you some good. You could also do a self-analysis and find out whether you want to adapt an approach where you want to start with high realistic expectations and then make tapering concessions. So this is a trade-off bit where you now move on to saying, I could try this, I give this up because this is what I will benefit. Some factors to consider when you're doing that, offering the concessions, trading off. One, evaluate the importance of a future relationship. Yes. What next? How can we do business even after this? Check the number of issues on the table. Have we covered everything? Have we covered the whole ground? And therefore, these concessions are helpful to us. Assess the zero-sum versus pi expanding nature of the issue. We talked about us agreeing to bake a bigger cake so that we can share in it rather than sharing the pie that we have on the table. And finally, ensure that you offer concession strategies, revoke reciprocal moves. It's a give and take, right? So it's not just you who's giving the concessions. Both parties are happy to give something and to take something. Okay. Just give me 1 minute. Let me check on something here. One second. Okay. Checking on my slides. Share screen. All right, we're back. I can make this full screen. Okay. So yeah, those 4 pointers we've covered. How do you improve, develop your negotiation skills? Yes, address issues in order of importance. So we've said bring out the big blocks, the real issues, put them on the table, prioritize those over smaller problems. Consider your options so that you have several possible options, including your partner, as we said. Plan ahead, be prepared as much as possible, and also look for places of common ground. Again, that is building that relationship so that in future, the rapport is there. What else could you do to develop your skills? You need to practice skills, the effective negotiation. So while these 2 days might provide you with the tips, the best way to certainly become good is to practice negotiation. Find a space and see how you can do that. Watch your behavior, be very aware of yourself so that you know what you are saying and doing. A question so that you know what the other party wants. And then also show willingness to compromise. Some of the best practices of negotiations are as follows. One, again, this is really a summary of what we've talked about. Know your partner, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. We look at what Zoppa means. And 3, understand the difference between wants and needs. Zoppa, is it here? Oh yeah, yeah. Yep, so we've talked about partner in quite a bit of detail. Let's look at Zoppa. Zoppa stands for zone of possible agreement. Where is that space where we both are at? So you say you're selling something at 50, somebody is at 75. What happens between the 50 and 75? That is your possible zone of agreement. Zoppa assumes overlap of wants and needs for the creation of a range of acceptable terms. Before you enter negotiation, create your Zoppa. That is a high and low range of acceptable terms. Make an effort to also identify your counterpart's zone of possible agreement. So it really is just that space where you can't go below and you can't go above. The third one is to understand the difference between wants and needs. A want is a desired outcome of the negotiation, your belief of the best way to solve a problem. A need, on the other hand, is a must for the negotiation to be successful, underlying the interest, the underlying interest. This is really what we want. Want is, yeah, it's a nice to have, but a need is really the bit that we're talking about. You need to explore options without compromising your needs. Ask your counterpart questions so as to ascertain his or her needs and wants. Paying good attention to explicit or verbalized and implicit or emotional needs. Use empathy in negotiations whenever applicable. Empathy involves understanding of your counterpart's goals and views, stepping into their shoes, appreciating where they're coming from and where they possibly want to go. This leads to enhanced interdependence and trust, and helps to focus on common interest and joint problem solving. All right, sounds good. As part of that third bit, you need to recognize then your emotions and the emotions of your counterpart. Listen carefully and pay close attention to your counterpart. Focus on the problem and aim for a solution. Another tip here, it has been found that successful negotiators across the world have always used role play method to practice before getting into the actual negotiation. So perform a role play of the negotiation with your friend or colleague. Before important negotiations, ask your friend to try to emulate as much as possible the other person's behavior, and also throw in some surprises such as aggression, boredom, stubbornness, and over-friendliness. I certainly would have wanted us to try this if we were in a face-to-face situation. And it's important also for real, if you can find, if you're going to negotiate, it's certainly part of that practice bit that we talked about. So you could use role play to enhance your position and skill. Quick check here. What does the acronym Zoppa stand for? Please use the chat box to give me your answer. And you could just say 1, 2, 3, or 4. You don't have to write the whole thing. 1 is zone of potential agreement. 2, zone of possible accommodation. 3, zone of potential arbitration. And 4, zone of possible agreement. Again, it's like 1 and, oh no, it's different. One, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, I see 4s. Pretty close, 1 and 4. Okay, move on then. Possible agreement, zone of possible agreement, that is 4. Okay, Zoppa. Oh, handling difficult negotiations. You could find a difficult, stubborn negotiator, other party who they don't want to budge from their stand. It is very important that in order to have effective and successful negotiation, then such difficult negotiators are tackled in the right manner. And how do you do this? Make sure that you speak in a tone and volume that is polite, not high, not low. Make sure that you do not tolerate use of foul language. Let them know that certain words are not acceptable to you or to your team. Again, ensure you speak in a slow, clear, crisp tone with more space in between your words and them. So you're calming everybody down. And don't get angry. In case such a person interrupts you, take a pause, they finish, and then continue their point that you're discussing before they interrupted you. Feel free to let them know that you don't, the interruptions are not necessary. And yeah, it's really about you and the control that you have and the effect of what they're saying. So keep yourself calm and collected. So yes, cool, calculative mind throughout the conversation with such a person. That does not mean that you appear meek or weak. Instead, you should come out across as assertive. So assertive is a good place. It's not weak. It's not aggressive. And do not react and ignore. Do not react to and ignore all the threats. Okay, before we go there, let me pause. Any questions so far or comments? Okay. All right, looks good. Maybe it's a good point to take a break here before we move on to our next subtopic, which will be negotiations in organizations. It is now, by my watch, 10:27. Like we did yesterday, a 20 minutes break. So we'll be back at 10:47. So please take a stretch, step off your chair, and see you in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Umepata hiyo part ya hebu no, acha nikutafutie. No, wacha nikuangalilie kwa there's one that I'm always used to write. Kidogo. Hello? Yes? Morning, how are you? Yes. Najua ni wewe. Niko na namba yako. Gani tena? Gani? Mkiwa watu wangapi? Wacha nimpigie nimuulize ni understand. Allow me to give you a call kindly. Sindio? Because umenipigia nikiwa in a midst of something.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes, then we can start again. But if you have any questions, meanwhile, please feel free to put them on the chat box. And if you are with us, there's a question from Polycarp. What role does personality play in negotiation? Can we give some thoughts to that question, please? Share your thoughts to the question. What role does personality play in negotiation? Yep, I see Gabriel, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mwalimu. Now, I think from my end, personality will be very key when you look at how you are going to negotiate with the people, because negotiation involves speaking with the people, interacting with the people. And if you have a good personality, you are able to approach people well, you are approachable well, it's going to make the results of your negotiation more productive and more successful. So if you are reserved in terms of your personality, you may not even dealing to people, and is very, very critical in making negotiations work. Back to you, Mwalimu.
Thank you, Gabriel. What if you're on the other end of the spectrum? You are loud and aggressive.
Yeah, yes. Again, it hinders the success because it creates barriers. It will always create a barrier to the people you are negotiating with or to the parties you are negotiating with. You will not be coming, you will not look like you are coming with clean hands. So it is going to derail the success of the negotiation.
Okay, great. Any other feedback around that?
Mwalimu, allow me to bring it home, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm just looking at the, let me use the political scene because that's a bit more familiar with all of us. We like being light. So imagine you're in a negotiation engagement per se with a phlegmatic like Kibaki, yeah? Someone who called a press conference because the wife said you call a press conference, just to confirm that I'm the only one. And you have a choleric like Matiangi. Of course, it sets a bit of a precedent, and you come with assumptions to that particular negotiation. How would that affect the outcome or the engagement? That's what I meant.
Okay. Any rejoinders there? Then maybe one suggestion would be to have a team of negotiators who bring different personalities to the table, and also to prepare so that you know who takes what part, and to be ready to take breaks and say, hey, hold on a minute, let us congregate, let's go outside, you may attend, and discuss what is on the table. Would that work?
Yes, makes sense.
All
makes
right,
sense.
all right, okay. Great, okay. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
Just a last one before you move on. Yeah, I think it's a good discussion. For me, I think what has helped is to know who's on the other side. I think from past practice, what we've done is to look at, if you know who's on the other side, has been to balance the personalities going in, just to make sure that if we have people who are shooting from the hip on the other side, making sure that we also have people who can calm down the temperatures on our side, but also you have someone who can shoot from the hip from your side as well. So I think for us, what has helped is to knowing the personalities on the other side, and also going in with people who can balance the personalities from the other side, so that depending on what item is on the table, you can know who's best placed to engage on that point. So whether you want someone who shoots from the hip and is able to ruffle the feathers, depending on the negotiation item and the tactic that you want to go in with, that is what has been helpful for us. Knowing yourself, someone mentioned knowing your strengths and weaknesses, but also knowing the people on the other side of the table, and knowing what is relating that with the item of discussion that's going to be placed on the table, and knowing who can be able to be the best placed to front it or to lead that negotiation. So interesting aspect that Polycarp has brought in.
Okay. Yep, and certainly that takes that bit around preparation, right? So preparing adequately to know exactly how you're going to go in, who's going to take what bit. Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Okay. Let's then move on to negotiations in organizations. Let's see what we have here. Types of negotiations. There are various types that take place in the business world. The most common are these three: managerial negotiations, commercial, and finally legal negotiations. What might those look like? Here in managerial, we are talking about day-to-day negotiations that take place in our daily life at work. These types of negotiations are done by people within the organization, and they're related to the internal problems that we might face or challenges. And such negotiations may arise with respect to working relations between groups of employees. And how do they take place? It could be different levels in between colleagues, of course, trade unions, legal advisors. It could be day-to-day conduct of the business. Of course, the manager needs to interact with the members of staff at different levels. And therefore, the manager has to report to his superiors, allocate responsibilities to his subordinates, and maintain a flow of information. For this purpose, the manager may enter into negotiations with the parties internal to the company. These negotiations could include those for pay, terms and working conditions, job descriptions, productivity, everything that goes in our workday, work plans, performance. As we mentioned earlier, we have to negotiate and have those discussions on a day-to-day basis. Then we have commercial negotiations. These are the types that are conducted with external parties. Generally, the main focus of such negotiations is financial gains. An attitude of give and take is prominent in such discussions. When a commercial negotiations run successfully, it results in drawing up of contracts. I gave an example earlier of mergers and acquisitions, and companies are merging or somebody is buying another business. This would be the place that this sits in. Okay. Other examples here, it may occur between management of the organization and its suppliers, government, regulators, customers, trade unions, legal advisors, or the public. There's quite a big range of stakeholders that you might have commercial negotiations with, including your customers. Examples of such negotiations are those for a contract with a distributor or a financial institution for credit or finance purposes. And we have legal negotiations, another type that usually formal or legally binding. It is important to avoid more disputes while negotiating in such scenarios. They are also contractual in nature and relate to gaining legal ground. This may occur between the management of the organization and the government or your customers, especially if you are in a highly regulated industry. You probably will have this, or an industry that requires a high level of compliance. Such negotiations are always held keeping in mind and adhering to the laws of the local and national government. Again, local government in our case could be the county level governments, which will have their own set of bylaws if you're operating in Kenya. Good. Quick multiple choice question. Which of the following is a type of negotiation in organizations that are conducted with external parties? Should be an easy one. managerial, legal, negotiation, informal, and commercial. That's certainly commercial. Okay, let's move on and look at the list, the issues in negotiations. And some of this we touched on during our discussion. The following are some of the major issues faced in a negotiation. You can see all sorts of things there. It could be the mood, personality, as we talked about. There could be differences due to gender perspectives. There could be, as somebody mentioned, die-hard bargainers who shoot from the hip. Could be lack of trust, and even differences in culture could play a role in any of this. Feel free to make a comment on the chat box on any of these or ask a question. And there's more. There could be communication problems, how we say things, how we understand them can be very different. There could be aggression that is uncalled for, dictatorial dominating attitude, unreasonable expectations is quite common, where you want to, ask for too much, overconfidence, and unchecked emotions. So all these are things that you want to be aware of and to notice and to be prepared on. These are also things that you want to take a time check sometimes and see how you can counter such problems if you face them in your negotiation. All right, I have a video that I'd like to share with you. Listen out, see how it relates to you and what you can take home from it. So just give me 1 minute. I'll stop to share first. Where am I? Okay.
We're joined by Horatio Falcao, Affiliate Professor of Decision Sciences here at INSEAD. We're talking about cross-cultural negotiations. Now, within that sort of sphere, there must be a great deal of room for misunderstanding.
Absolutely, Stuart. The element of cross-cultural negotiation is a concern of every negotiator who negotiates internationally, right? And it's a question that comes very often, especially in a place like INSEAD, where we deal so much with the international aspect of negotiations. And two of the main misconceptions that I find, as you just put forward, on cross-cultural negotiations is that, if I were to summarize in a little sentence, is most people tend to underestimate cross-cultural negotiations, and most people tend to overestimate at the same time.
Francis, we
So
can't
how
see
can
the
we have
video.
this, a seemingly paradoxical? I say which
Okay,
Chinese
let me check again. Hold on.
with the Chinese from Beijing or Shanghai, the one that came from the countryside and moved to a city, or the one who
Did you see it at all at one point or not?
No.
We didn't see, just hearing.
Okay, hold on, let me try again. Oh, I know what. Let me see. I need to do it differently.
We're joined by Horatio Falcao.
Can you see it now?
No, it's blank.
Malim, you may need to share your screen. Yeah.
Okay. Just
Affiliate Professor of Decision Sciences here at INSEAD. We're talking about cross-cultural negotiations. Now, within that sort of sphere, there must be a great deal of room for misunderstanding.
Absolutely, absolutely, Stuart. The element of cross-cultural negotiation is a concern of every negotiator who negotiates internationally, right? And it's a question that comes very often, especially in a place like INSEAD, where we deal so much with the international aspect of negotiations. And two of the main misconceptions that I find, as you just put forward, on cross-cultural negotiations is that, if I were to summarize in a little sentence, is most people tend to underestimate cross-cultural negotiations, and most people tend to overestimate at the same time cross-cultural negotiations. So how can we have this what seems a seemingly paradoxical situation? Let me start with the underestimating part. People come to me normally and ask, so Horacio, how do I negotiate with the Chinese? Very hot question right now. And I say, which Chinese exactly do you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to the Chinese from Beijing or Shanghai? The one that came from the countryside and moved to a city, or the one who was born and raised in a city? A young one or an older one, right? The one who left to study abroad and came back, or one who always lived here? So there are so many Chinese, and by the way, we know that there are a lot of Chinese out there, that it becomes really hard because they all will have what? Different cultures beyond just being Chinese. And that's the underestimation. People tend to only look at national culture when they go into international negotiations, and they try to look into that, but they don't look what? That there is also educational culture, race culture, a gender culture, a religious culture, right? And all of these will also impact the way people behave, and that's all cross-cultural, which then means what? We're underestimating the role of culture because we're only looking at the national one. And we need to, as negotiators, to also try to understand all of the others. Why? Because they're going to help us understand how the person thinks and communicates, and therefore be able to negotiate and persuade that person better.
From the overestimation part, that's when perhaps you may be negotiating with somebody from a similar sort of background, that you may be making certain assumptions about that person's stance when those assumptions may not be correct.
Absolutely. And that's a mistake that many people fall into, to assume too much because they perceive the national culture is there, and then they underestimate the risk. Right? So for example, sometimes I will tell people, and maybe I'll be making a little bit of an exaggeration here, but just to make a point, which is sometimes I would much rather negotiate with an older woman, Muslim, who lives in the countryside of Mongolia, than maybe with a Catholic, middle-aged, lawyer background male from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where I come from. Right? Why? Because with that second person, we might feel like we're so alike that we'll make so many assumptions of what we should know and understand from one another as well, that we're going to many times run the risk of overestimating that proximity, right? And in overestimating that proximity, we might not mention some of the risks or opportunities that we perceive, and therefore running the risk of either losing money or not making as much as we could. Whereas with someone who I see so different from me, I'm going to be so extra careful through the negotiation and making sure I dot all the I's and cross all the T's, that I actually will run less of that risk. right? So we also have to be aware of that, the visual proximity and how that might actually fool us into thinking what is culture, what's not, and the assumption risk beyond it.
But given that there are so many different people from different backgrounds, and how can you overcome this?
Well, basically then, the first assumption you should have is that every negotiation is a cross-cultural exercise, right? So that's the short answer.
Every negotiation?
Every negotiation. You're negotiating with your wife, with your husband, that's a cross-culture, it's a different gender. And different genders see things differently and they talk about things differently. You're talking to your kids. Many people come to me and say, how do I negotiate with my kids? Well, it's a different age. It's different. It's a different culture. They see the world. They like different kind of music. They like different kinds of food. They like to do different kinds of things. That's as different a culture as it might get. And yet, they are your own blood. So you have to understand, how do they think differently because of that cultural distance? How do they behave differently? How do they think? How do they speak differently? So that I can what? I can find the right arguments to go into their mind and help them see the world as I see it. And in helping them do that, they'll probably be a little closer to seeing and agreeing to what I want them to see and agree.
But just to go to negotiations within a company, I've seen personally in Hong Kong that there's a different style, a different approach to negotiations than you would have in the West, where the West might be more direct. In Asia, you can skirt around the subject for, say, 20 minutes before you get onto the key item.
And here we might then flip on to the overestimation side, right? People then, when they deal with someone who is that different, what they will probably do many times is blame everything that goes wrong or difficult on national culture. But maybe you're just dealing with a very shy person from Hong Kong who is not very forthcoming in a relationship. It will just say, because I don't know that person so well, it's just so easy to attach it to the flag and say, oh, because they're Chinese and they're Asians, of course they're not as forthcoming, for example, when it might not be the case, right? There might be some very extrovert people from Hong Kong, and I'm sure there are, right? On the other hand then, there will be some those other cultures, again, the race, the gender, the ethnicity, the religion, the age, all of those will impact. And the negotiator should be looking to the whole spectrum. However, it is true, as you're putting forward, that if you come from a different national culture, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to have some different rituals, cultural rituals. And how we build relationship, as you referred to yourself, or how we communicate specifically, has to be done differently. So for example, if we go into a place like the Middle East, you would expect people to spend a fair amount of time talking about themselves and trying to understand one another, building more of a stronger relationship before they go into the substance of the deal itself, right? Maybe in the US or Scandinavia, people are going to jump further straight into the business. Just having a small introduction, maybe talk about the weather and things like that, and boom, go straight into it. So the rituals are different. But sometimes the order in which you do things, or how you, or the reason why you do things, or what should or should not be done, will be underlyingly the same. Right? The same based on what? On two main negotiation cultures that we find out there.
But just to take, say, the example of the Japanese culture, you do see a lot of rituals attached to that sort of negotiating process.
Absolutely. So for example, just to go back to the relationship building phase, which is one that is very different, right? Sometimes if you want to create a long-lasting relationship in Japan with a business partner, which will generate hopefully a lot of value for you in the future, you might need to spend sometimes a year before you can even start talking about business. Just really getting to know one another. This is extremely important. You spend 1 year trying to build a relationship with someone in the US, they're going to get tired of you. They're going to move on to someone who actually will start talking money faster. So again, the ritual is different. But both of them will do in that investment on relationship to the level that their rituals require, right? For example, communication, or the process in which people deal with one another, is another very important dimension in which rituals will impact tremendously. For example, in Japan, you don't say no directly in many instances. You have to find a more indirect way to let the other person know, understand that I don't want to do something, right? Now, the same principle will apply to the Japanese or another culture, in which, as I try to indirectly tell you no, I still want that no to be as clear in your mind as I can possibly convey it. Just the form in doing that will be different.
Is it possible to get somebody to coach you in terms of dealing with a particular culture?
Absolutely. So here's where I would make the two distinctions. If you want to become a better negotiator, period, then a negotiation training or coach will help you, right? And it will help you to give you all the underlying things you should be worrying about to being successful in a negotiation. If you want to have a little polishing on those rituals, then a cultural coach might actually be more relevant, because they will be more understanding of, so how are relationships actually built in the workplace in a place like Japan, Korea, China, if you're coming from Europe or the US, for example, right? Or vice versa, right? How do we actually communicate when there is a difference in power? How does that normally go? Or when we coordinate, how are you supposed to propose an idea? How is the decision making made so that I can respect if you need to consult with other people, or if I expect you already to decide to me on the spot? So those sensitivities, I would actually much rather have someone from that country helping me understand what normally goes on, especially someone who can be what? A bi-national experienced person. Someone who lived in that country that you're going for, but also has some experience from your own, so that they can do the translation as accurately as possible.
So when it comes down to it, do you basically then look at the person you're negotiating with as either friend or foe? Somebody you can work with, or somebody who's going to work against you?
Well, I start with the assumption maybe of, at the very get-go, of zero. I don't know. And why does that help me? That helps me to approach you from a learning perspective. I'll start to try to gather and ask and learn as fast as I can about you to know if you are friend or foe, right? So by coming with cultural assumptions, they're always foe or they're always friend, that's wrong, because that individual in front of you might be neither, right? Or might be both, depending on how you approach them. If I already approach as foe, they will reciprocate. If I already approach as friend, they might reciprocate as well. So sometimes the power is with me in defining what the other one will do. Therefore, I prefer to come in and start learning, gauging as carefully as I can. Are you in one block? Are you in the other block? Or you're the kind of person who will work with me depending on where I go? And then as soon as I start getting some of that learning, I'll start to proactively then send the messages of, I would much rather work with you on, hopefully, the friend block, so that we can do more together than just fight, for example.
So you're going through a process of exploration with the person.
Absolutely.
And then presumably you adjust your own stance accordingly.
The adjustment part, I like to recommend to people to be more proactive in that, right? Because if you adjust too much, you end up getting out of what? Your comfort zone. You start getting into their home turf. And that can become a dangerous play, because you're outside of your area of reach. And of your best behavior and expertise in decision making. So I like to understand what's going on. I want to learn, so that when I start driving the process, I know how to better lead you. But it's not so much for me to follow, because the other person might not know how to lead. So hopefully a person with good negotiation training can lead, but they need to understand what kind of language should I be talking. Because if I go to Brazil, I need to speak Portuguese to lead. If I go to China, I need to speak Chinese. So it's not that I'm going to change my leadership style necessarily, but I'm going to change the way I convey it to people.
So what are the steps then that you would recommend that people should take when dealing with cross-cultural negotiations?
That's so there's the underestimation, overestimation. That's more of an internal thinking process. The other one is to remember that to learn, right? If every experience is a cross-cultural experience, there will always be assumptions, there will always be differences that you need to gather as you go through the process. And you need to understand the person in front of you. Because if you get right what 99.9% of the Chinese do, but not the person in front of you, you failed. So you need to really understand that one person there. Then the other thing you want to do is, in trying to understand, so how much we adapt or adjust to one another, to go back to what you said. And after you do that exploration exercise and you start learning more who that person is, then if you have the chance, either by gathering intelligence early on or by separating the meeting and things like that, if you're talking more of a long-term thing, for example, sit down and really prepare. And that's where the cultural coach can be quite helpful, or a negotiation, to also help you distinguish what? In terms of negotiation, as I mentioned earlier, there are only two cultures. There's the competitive culture and there's the collaborative culture, as you mentioned, friend or foe in a way, right? And that can come out with all sorts of what? Different codings, but those are just the rituals. So if you understand the underlying culture of negotiation that person is following, it becomes much easier then with that little coding to move forward, and that learning process becomes much faster, which means you can prepare much earlier and much faster and much better. Exploration, learning, preparation, and then what? Adjusting. Adjusting in the sense of what I mentioned before. Not completely giving up your way towards the other. Maybe also not requiring them to do that, because it might get them too uncomfortable. Some people say, so should we meet in the middle? It's a way, but then both of us feel half uncomfortable. So many people will say, let's try to do a third way. Let's try to build a process that works for both of us, considering who we are.
And that's kind of a win-win situation.
And that hopefully will lead to a win-win. Because I'm not trying to play a game on you. You're not trying to play your game on me. We're not trying to play a game which is kind of half and half, which is not systematic, which means it might be two odd halves together, right? We try to build a system that works for both of us, considering what? What are the underlying principles that really matter here, and not just the rituals. And we create our own rituals. Now, that might take time, right? And I'll give you that any day. But if you're talking about a long-term relationship or a big value creation exercise, right, or something that just matters a lot to you, then that's at least the right way to do it. It might be a little harder, it might take a little bit more time, but you run much less risks, but you're much more certain to be successful.
And reduce the risk of any misunderstanding.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Horatio, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, I hope that was. Oops.
The negotiation can be over before it even gets started. Let's pretend that I'm an entrepreneur raising capital from 3 different funds operating under 3 different cultural norms.
Trying to get back. I hope that was helpful. A few pointers on successful negotiation. Any thoughts or takeaways from it? Anybody wants to share something that caught their eye or ear?
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one thing that has come very substantial is that while you negotiate, there would be different approaches for different cultures. You may not just a similar approach to each and everyone. You need to understand probably the cultures, maybe the psychosocial status as you approach the negotiation process. I think for me, that is a key take home for me.
All right. That's interesting, yes, because he says not to stereotype, not to think a certain, say, and he used, international countries that even us here in Kenya, you see a person there like this, or their name is like this, and you make that stereotype or assumption. You've got to be very aware of not to do that. So yeah, that's a good point. Rose, I see your hand is up. Oh, okay.
Francis, maybe for me, it's a point that you've just last mentioned. It's a point about awareness. And I think that's what has been ringing in my head, just about broadly about the framework and the cultural awareness, but also awareness about the person who's sitting in front of you or the people who are sitting in front of you, but also awareness about yourself. So I think for me, the key word there is about awareness, situational awareness, but also personal awareness and the whole environment surrounding the negotiations.
Okay, great.
I'd also like to comment, Mwalimu.
Yes.
Yeah, I was impressed by the fact that you could be having a Chinese, then you are asking, are they from the village? Have they been exposed? So the idea that, again, it is stereotype. It's not good to have stereotype because a person can be so different from what we suspect they are, depending on their exposure, their religious inclination, their age, and all those variables. So I was impressed by the way the situation can be so varied from what we imagine from the simple labels we make of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, that intersectionality that we have as human beings, excuse me, is really, really important. So, they mentioned it could be your gender, your male, you're Christian. So what does that do to your values, your education background? All these things come into play. And there are some things that are not immediately visible to you. And again, that's where this awareness part comes in, because what you see physically with me does not tell you anything about my values, for example. You know, it's the iceberg model. So there's a tip of the iceberg, what you see, what you hear. But underneath, there's a whole lot of other things that drive me, motivate me, that you won't see. So it's important to find out actually about other people, and then that helps you to create that good space for negotiation. All right. Unfortunately, I can't see. What am I missing here? There's a question that I see from Rose here. She's an opinion that says, I think lack of attention to details and not being focused and not being silent. Being disguised can also cost the negotiation process. Yeah, of course, again, all those things, Rose, that we are saying in terms of your preparation, and also in terms of the personality that you are, will have an effect on the negotiation process. Good. Let's move on to the characteristics of a good negotiator. He or she is highly skilled in his domain of expertise. Yes, you have your facts and figures right. Experienced in domain of expertise, something skilled and experienced, all right. Well prepared before the negotiation. We keep hearing this again and again, so we come well prepared. Confidence, yes. Assertiveness, good. Maybe doesn't demand respect, but earns the respect of others, yeah. And is meticulous and articulate. So preparation again. They are bold and daring in the approach. Bold does not mean aggressive. To me here, it means really being assertive more than anything else. To use a direct approach to reach our objectives and not hiding their cards or their intentions. They have good perspective and intuitive that drives them into the right place. Unemotional is they are unemotional and objective in dealing with others. Unemotional does not mean they are disconnected from the other people. They have the empathy that is required. They're emotionally intelligent and objective. Good learner and observer, yes. And a good learner means that you're a good listener and you give other people space to speak. You understand the body language of other people. Open and flexible, not rigid. You're capable of pressing with assertiveness. Patient, calm, and mature. You've got good leadership qualities, which means that you take people to a good space. You want a win-win situation. Does not display weakness in front of others. I would say you need to be human, to display some vulnerability, but maybe again, this is very situational. Okay. Rose, please go ahead. I see your hand is up. Or is it an old hand? Okay. Continue. Capable of negotiating by maintaining a strong stance, confident one. You can analyze the pros and cons of the situation. You can read the moment. And you understand when to exit out of a negotiation as part of one of those 4 styles that we saw. And exiting might mean that you exit, but you allow somebody else to take over the negotiation because they provide a different perspective. You've got good empathy towards your fellow negotiators, not necessarily opponents. And you have got to be patient and listen actively. Okay. Let's look at final bit here on tips for effective negotiation. Don't waver from your stand, but be flexible enough. Manage the situation as it is. Learn as much as you can, but be careful not to get involved in, the other people's issues. Maybe you're negotiating with a supplier, but they have internal problems, and you don't want to get in there. Be patient and attentive. Voice your opinions as well as what you want from the other person. Be ready to compromise if necessary. Again, prepare well before the meeting. Pay close attention to the timing during the negotiation meeting. Agree on the timing and where it's going to take place, and realize that it might take more time than you have planned for, so be flexible with that. Ask relevant questions to gain more information about the other person's stance, and do not bring your ego between you and the other person. Always be moral and stick to your principles. Yes, integrity and ethics come in there. Make sure to offer and gain commitment. You offer your own commitment, and also you gain commitment from the other person that this is going to happen, this will work. We are not just talking. You want to walk the talk. Make sure to close each negotiation with confirmation on the agreement reached with the other party, and do not take out any arguments presented during the negotiation personally. So don't take it personally. Right, let's see here what we have. There are 2 case scenarios here. Thomas Drake is a project manager in Helios Inc., a leading apparel giant. He has to often negotiate with his suppliers for procurement of raw materials. What preparations should Thomas make before entering into any negotiations? What skills should Thomas hone to become a great negotiator? I think I'm gonna give you this as a takeaway. Just think through those 2 questions and you know, and more importantly, really, is for you to start to see where you are at in terms of you as a negotiator and what you need to start working on. Let's do a summary of our 2 days. Before we do that, maybe I can look at the chat box. Let's see what we might have. Okay, thank you, Rose. Styles of negotiation skills. So what did we cover here? We looked at different things, stages of the negotiation process, the styles, types of negotiation, strategies for developing those skills, and the types of third parties that we might have. So we're just summarizing what we had yesterday and today. The styles we went through were competition, collaboration, avoidance, accommodation, and compromise. Remembering that we also discussed the scenarios where each of these could fit. So remember that it's important for you to recognize the situation and read it properly so that you use the correct style. We had 2 types of strategies. One was the distributive one, where you want to win under all costs, and the integrative one, which is more collaboration and interaction-based, relationship-based. How do you develop your negotiation skills? A couple of pointers there. Analyze the situation and define your hope, your goal, what you want to achieve. Don't get too personal with feelings. Be prepared to arrive at a compromise, at flexibility part, and stick to what you say. Don't waver. Listen carefully to the other party and confirm and ratify your decision or agreement. We had several third-party types who can now come in and assist if need be to help to come to an agreement. We have the mediator, we have the arbitrator, we have the consultant and conciliator. We mentioned that, yes, sometimes those roles could interchange and interlock, but you want each one of those to play a specific role when and if it is necessary. Stages of the process. Start with the meeting, prepare for that, make sure it's agreeable. Inquiry bit, finding out what's happening, who's there. Then the negotiation, the bargaining, give and take, trade-offs situation. And you have your closure, and finally acceptance, where you sign off or record what you have agreed. Okay, this is really just a glossary of the terms that we have. But we have come to the end of our negotiation skills workshop or session. I would like to just hear from you any thoughts or feedback that you might have through the chat box. But from me, I hope this has helped you to start to have some thoughts and conversations around your own skills, or maybe for your colleagues. What is it that you want to start to do? How can you take this further away from, just the points? I think it's really a life skill, if you ask me. It's very helpful in a lot of ways. So very many thanks to all of you for joining and for staying on. My very best wishes as we come to the close of the year. I hope and pray that the next year brings you good tidings, success and good health for you and your families. And looking forward to having you again some other time. But a very big thank you and my very best wishes for now. All right. Thank you, and God bless you all.